MCU is a bit of a disaster. It's been covered on a lot of channels. I'm definitely not going to be the first one here to do this. But what I do want to get into is my own belief on where the MCU got off course, where the schism happened. So, first point here, as stated on so many other YouTube channels and video essays, the primary problem is and always will be the quality of the writing. Listen to any great directors, actors, or producers in the realm of film, and they all say the same thing. Great stories begin with great writing. Can there be happy accidents like the original Iron Man movie, where they were making it up as they went along? Sure. But they are very few and far between. Script and story are the framework that all films are built upon, and without them, well, to continue the metaphor, the building crumbles. So, since the focus of this channel is to discuss heroes in film and in large part where they have gone, it's first necessary to say that it all comes back to writing. These films suffer from poorly written heroes who don't do anything particularly heroic ever anymore. The DCEU is now officially dead. Lucasfilm has essentially shot itself in the foot so many times, it's destroyed Star Wars, it's destroyed Indiana Jones, and so on. The MCU, once the beacon of successful superhero storytelling, is now a sad shell of itself, full of multiversal nonsense, poorly executed characters, and an overabundance and reliance on vague CGI, poorly written characters that are all mostly unlikable, and worst of all, none of them are heroic. The unfortunate thing here is that the few bright spots we have in terms of fun storytelling have very little to do with the MCU, or really any comic book property. I think the one-two punch of the failures between the Marvels and Madam Web are going to essentially be the death knell of Hollywood thinking that superhero films are bankable. I have some vague hope in Deadpool 3, but again, it's a Disney product. X-Men 97, this new cartoon, so many warning bells going off on that. But audiences are signaling more and more with their wallets and how little interest they have in being preached to, and hopefully studios are taking note. The unfortunate thing for me as a comic book fan from my earliest childhood is that the genre is now waning. Studios are likely going to take the failure of current comic book or superhero related content as a sign that the market has dried up and they'll move on. The real tragedy in this aspect of things is that as much as I hate where these films have ended up, hate that we only had a few years of the genre truly shining even more. So let's establish real quick what this golden era was, for me as well as I think for most comic book fans. It really started in the summer of 2008 when Iron Man and The Dark Knight released in the same summer movie season. Let's just take a moment to appreciate that movie year, by the way, when not only did we get Iron Man and The Dark Knight, we also had Tropic Thunder. So if you want to talk about a watershed year that really defined a decade, it's hard to point at a better one than that. This golden era lasted almost exactly a decade, and it culminated in Avengers Infinity War in 2018. This era brought us projects like the first Avengers film, Netflix's Daredevil, Deadpool, Guardians of the Galaxy, Captain America Winter Soldier, Logan, Captain America Civil War, Spider Man Into the Spider Verse, and finally Infinity War. Now, given that I work around children in an elementary school and have young children of my own, I would also honorable mention Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider Man Homecoming, Venom. Quality aside, kids love that character. And now, real quick on those honorable mentions, I don't think any of those are fantastic films. I have issues with all of them, particularly Black Panther and Venom, as far as the writing goes. But they were hugely influential on the kids at the time. For the sake of brevity, I'm excluding the DCAU, projects like The Spectacular Spider Man, something my daughters and I watched endlessly, and others. I won't go into the exhaustive list of so so projects or those that appeal to a small yet very vocal subset of fans. Yes, the Snyderverse and the larger DCEU has its proponents, and they are extremely vocal. Let's just get this out there with the Snyderverse. If you love them, that's great. All fine. but on this channel, I will have critiques of it. I have huge issues with the structure of it, the characterizations, and just want to say I feel like it was a failure from the beginning. If that is your favorite movie universe, that is completely fine. However, I feel like what you enjoy is a very Elseworlds dark take on those characters, not the characters as they could have or should have been. Seriously, in 2018, kids were shouting Wakanda forever and doing the arm cross salute constantly. No one, and I mean no one, was walking around saying, Save Martha! So, getting back to the MCU and where it went off track, I'm sure if there are people commenting, Avengers Endgame has come up. Yes, it was notably left off that list. First, this was because while I love moments of that film, for example, seeing the big three, Iron Man, Cap, and Thor, advancing together on Thanos is literally something I drew over a decade before. But let's admit, that movie has serious structure problems. Secondly, I left it off the list because I believe the MCU went off track in between Infinity War and Endgame. Let's go back. In 2018 2019, Disney Marvel released two films in between their major Infinity War saga, Ant-Man and the Wasp and Captain Marvel, respectively. This was the moment that the people guiding the MCU were going to choose the road the MCU would travel for the next phase. They were literally picking a path and laying the groundwork. This was the moment that something amazing could have been built to set up the next challenge these heroes would face after Thanos, and Marvel blew it. It happened so quietly and so subtly, not many people picked up on it at the time. I certainly didn't. It was only in the coming years that I realized what had happened. See, at that time, the two films essentially had two very different avenues for exploration. Ant-Man and the Wasp explored the idea of the quantum realm. Quick quiz, take 30 seconds and remind me of the plot of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Just the broad strokes. Go ahead, I'll wait. Yeah, I'm not going to draw this out for 30 seconds. Let's just be honest. Very few of us remember that or had it stick out in our minds. But to recap, Ant-Man and the Wasp focuses on bringing Janet Van Dyne, the original Wasp, back from the quantum realm while Ant-Man and co. evade the villain Ghost and a wasted Walton Goggins. Another video that will be made eventually is listing the amazing actors wasted in small Marvel roles, and it's just astounding when you really look at it. They achieve their objective, Ghost is cured, they discover the quantum realm, and Scott ends his term being on house arrest. But most importantly, Ant-Man and the Wasp introduced time travel and time dilation as a possibility to the MCU. The mid-credit scene sets up the plot device in time travel that would allow the heroes to put everything right in Endgame. This would expand to the TVA and Loki, becoming a concept, and from there, the multiverse. This was the erosion of the MCU as a semi-analogous world to our own. To Marvel, meanwhile, should have opened up the universe into a larger galactic story. For anyone who needs a refresher on that cinematic achievement, here we go. Let's see if I can do this in as few syllables as possible. Veers, Powers, Patriarchy, Scrolls, Earth, 90s, Men, Bad, Carol, Awesome, Excellent de-aging technology, the Cat, Explosions, Powers, more powers. Girls get it done. Ronan? Men Bad, the origin of this, why, a pager, and space. You got it? Is there really anything more to add about that movie? And the only effect the events from Captain Marvel had going forward was a UX Captaina in Endgame, a forgettable Disney Plus show, a terrible Disney Plus show, and an even more forgettable film? So to recap, Marvel had the opportunity and extreme audience goodwill coming out of Infinity War to make two smaller scale stories that built upon the existing structure of the Marvel Universe. It could have pushed them forward into an even more grand story. They could have chosen a sprawling, impactful narrative that tied into Thor's quote from the first Avengers film about Earth playing around with power that opened them up to having to play on a larger stage. This path would have meant putting Captain Marvel center stage as Marvel's galactic protector of Earth. Or they could have chosen a meandering time and reality warping story with no narrative consistency and ever expanding universe breaking events. Guess which one Marvel chose? So, to misquote V from V for Vendetta, I know why they did it. By all reports, the original plan was for James Gunn to head up the cosmic side of the MCU. Well, Gunn was famously fired from Marvel in July of 2018 because of old tweets. And because of that, the cosmic side of Marvel withered. Captain Marvel has so many of its own issues as a film, and in a companion video, I'll talk about how that movie should have been made. But from this humble art teacher's perspective, Marvel had a real chance in between Infinity War and Endgame to grow the universe, to expand it out into new story pathways. Yes, the Guardians of the Galaxy were out there having their adventures, but those were always somewhat insular stories about the back alleys of this universe. Captain Marvel had the ability to set up huge galactic stakes and issues. The Kree Skrull War could have been a major focus of Phase 4, which could have then led into a massive Phase 5 with the Fantastic Four and Galactus. Not the X-Men, I have so much more to say on them, and we'll need multiple videos to do it. But spoiler alert, they're my favorite comic book property of all time, and I don't think they should exist in the main MCU at all, and should always be in their own universe. But getting back to the path that Marvel chose and what could have been, Infinity War truly had the breadcrumbs already there for a three-pronged attack Marvel could have taken, an expanding universal conflict with unclear good guys and bad guys, more mystical threats tied into Lovecraftian ideas that Doctor Strange could have dealt with, and smaller scale stories on Earth that dealt with the fallout of Infinity War and the snap. In a perfect world, Black Panther would have led the Earth storyline, but the unfortunately tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman made that a failed thread. I'll get to this as well in a later video, but the clear path forward was to bring back Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger and force him to go through a redemptive arc as the new Black Panther. He could have teamed with Bucky and Falcon to head a new Earthbound group of heroes, and in that way, we could have been exposed to the next core group of Earth's protectors. Thinking about this now, picture a Phase 4 that saw a much better cast and better realized Captain Marvel teaming up with Doctor Strange, defending Earth from new threats. The Nova Corps could have been decimated in much the same way as in the Annihilation Wave, leaving us with the Richard Rider Nova. The Skrulls could have been introduced as both victims of an oppressive Kree Empire, but also as complicated, opportunistic creatures that prey on more susceptible planets and cultures. As a narrative thrust, you could have had a Captain Marvel that was trying to navigate being a leader and figure on Earth while feeling like she was late to the party and not taken seriously as a hero. In essence, use the fact that the character appeared late in the game and has to prove herself. Think about Ripley in the movie Aliens. She's essentially introduced to the Space Marines as a joke. They refer to her as Snow White. She hasn't proven herself. They think it's ridiculous that they're bringing her along. But throughout the film, she proves why she is the hero that they need in that moment. She is the one true figure that's going to pull them through that. That could have been Captain Marvel's role. Instead, Marvel went small. They focused on this multiversal idea that fragmented the entire story and made everything inconsequential. It's so odd to me that Disney Marvel brought in all of these writers from Rick and Morty and yet failed to understand the central argument Rick and Morty makes about multiverses. Essentially, if there are infinite versions of a universe, then no choice you make matters. This has been exhaustively discussed by YouTubers like The Critical Drinker, Mauler, Nerdrotic, Film Threat, but it's so true. If you have infinite universes, there are no stakes. This is the path that Ant-Man and the Quantum Realm laid out. Once the Quantum Realm pathway and time travel was chosen, the MCU splintered. The social issues that have taken over the MCU are certainly an issue here, and have been covered so effectively by Nerdrotic that I don't think there's much I can add to that conversation. All I can say is that for a company so focused on empowering female characters, it is bizarre to me that when it came time for characters to square up against the next big bad in Kang, it was not Captain Marvel who faced him, but Ant-Man. Phases 1 through 3 had their issues, but they did a pretty good job of building up a conflict between Tony Stark's Iron Man and Thanos. The recurring theme of Tony Stark feeling an impending crisis coming and trying to prevent it, culminating in his I am Iron Man moment, feels earned. It's successful. I fall into the camp that is okay with Tony's story ending with him sacrificing himself. Cutting forward to phase 4 with this broken, disjointed mess of a story and the arbitrarily selected big bad Kang the Conqueror, there's no impact. And by the way, what exactly has Kang conquered in the MCU? I mean, Thanos was called the Mad Titan, but we saw him do that. We saw him decimating planets. Other than being a lonely hermit at the end of time or ruling over a city in the quantum realm only to get his ass handed to him by Ant-Man, Kang didn't seem to be much of a threat. Then you have Wanda Maximoff. One of the more intriguing and interesting characters in the MCU, who Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness managed to assassinate both her character and Doctor Strange's character, squandering both of them. And so now here we are. Phase 5, I guess? A myriad of projects and false starts with no real heroes to speak of. No characters that show any actual heroism at any particular time. We've had a few bright spots. I personally was a big fan of the third Guardians film. I watched those series again with my own daughters and got a lot out of that ending to that particular saga. No Way Home, I believe, spins its wheels a bit in the first hour, but it is hard to ignore how successful that last hour is. From the moment Norman Osborn shows his true colors up through that finale, which sees Spider Man finally being the Spider Man I first saw when I opened a comic when I was 10 years old, really captured the feeling I wanted to get from those movies. So I loved it. Now, what wasn't so good? Let's get into Thor, a completely wasted hero who I definitely will have a whole series on. The Marvels was, well, a movie that happened. Black Panther Wakanda Forever was too little too late. The Eternals, is there any point in giving that one an opinion? I mean, I think the MCU itself has chosen to forget about that one in universe. Again, Multiverse of Madness is just an insane character assassination of multiple characters and ruins so much about the ideas behind this universe. Shang-Chi was a film, again, started off great, ruined its concept about halfway through. And this is what keeps happening. Again, it's the writing. It's over and over and over again. And again, big thing in all of this is that the Disney Plus series essentially made all of this so watered down and pointless, and it's so confusing. It just led to a big, frustrating mess. All of these Disney Plus series, Miss Marvel, She-Hulk, which I only watched just so I could illustrate to my daughters how horrible of a role model She-Hulk was. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which, given that Captain America was my favorite Avenger in the previous films, had huge potential. I like Falcon, love the Winter Soldier character, and somehow they made it such a boring, confusing mess of political ideology. There was nothing to take from it. Then there's Loki. It had a decent ending, some fun moments, good character interactions held up by good actors, but shattering effects on the logic and plots of the MCU. What am I leaving out here? Let's see. Can anybody think of it? Oh, I know. WandaVision. Again, another one. Great premise. Good start. And then you get to the last episode and just complete character assassination. And I think that about sums it up. That's what we've had. That has been our last 5 years of Marvel. And really, is there anything to take away from that that's a positive? Other than, again, for me, Guardians 3 and No Way Home. The point in all of this is the MCU had a bright, shining decade with more wins than losses. It introduced characters that children and adults loved, and it could have kept that going. Superhero films are not a genre unto themselves. They are a concept that can be applied to any genre: action, fantasy, horror, adventure, science fiction, western, drama, and so on. The MCU may be fading. My hope is that someday new writers and storytellers can pick up some of these threads and start fresh. I agree with most of the critical sphere here on YouTube when I say that Disney Marvel needs to hit pause on things. Just stop for a few years. Let it breathe. Take 2 years to have a bake-off of writers who can come in with their pitches on how to move forward. If you have to keep the IP in theaters, tell solitary, smaller scale stories that are character driven and can be easily woven into a larger universe later. For example, Moon Knight did not need to be a Disney Plus show. It could have been a fun 2 hour film about a really conflicted, challenging, street level superhero. Maybe not a $1 billion film, but you could have spent 150 million on it at the most, probably 100 million being conservative, and made easily 600 million based on the brand name. Or change it up. Cloak and Dagger could have been fun. You could have made a Daredevil movie that was pretty great. But as you're doing this, as you are scaling back, as you are only telling one film narrative a year that can be tied into something bigger later on, you're mapping it all out. You're getting everything planned. You know what connects to where. You know how to introduce a character and maybe hint at something larger, but tell that character's film in the most constructive way possible. And then once you have your groundwork laid, you come back strong. In another 2 year time span, put out one big film each year. Not the blitz where you're just throwing out everything under the sun, because comic book films can't handle that strain anymore. Audiences would come back if they knew, hey, you know what? I haven't seen a good Marvel movie in the last few years, and those last two smaller ones were actually really great. Did you happen to catch Moon Knight? By the way, did you see they're coming out with this big Avengers movie in a couple years? Why, yes, I did. I'm actually excited for that. You would gain back your audience. And that's the point. There is a way back from this. The easiest way back, my personal recommendation, the way you fix it right now, today, stop any Disney Plus show. Cancel it, cut it off, done with it. Do not put out anything on Disney Plus unless it is something like a holiday special, like with the Guardians. Nothing that's going to damage anything. Fun little self-contained stories again. But you deal with this multiversal nonsense. You shut that door. There's a thing in the comics, the end zone. It's been there for years. It's where the Fantastic Four would run into Annihilus. It led to the Fantastic Annihilation Wave storyline in comics. Do that. The wrong door got opened. The wrong universe was accessed. Monkeying around with multiverses opened this up. And now the end zone is coming through. It's wiping out all kinds of universes. It's closing doors. You do that. You use that to reset. Make that a reason why you recast Captain Marvel. It's a Captain Marvel from another dimension, but she can't get back. You bring back Wanda if you want to, although I don't know who's really arguing for a Scarlet Witch at this point. But you reset your universe doing that. And you know what? It would work. Nobody would argue with you. That way you can bring in Michael B. Jordan as Eric Killmonger. He has to become Black Panther. And then you introduce the true Fantastic Four. And then ultimately you bring in Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom, who is the true complicated villain. He has shades of what made Thanos so great. He is ruthless. He is brutal. He will wipe out anyone in his way. But he also cares for his country, so he wouldn't be trying to destroy the world. He might actually work with the heroes to protect Earth, but then double cross them when it comes to his own benefit. That can allow for some amazing storylines. And if you have to tell a story on Earth, tap into the Dark Avengers story. Make it to where during all of this conflict that's been going on out in the universe, a new government-backed Dark Avengers has come up. Not the Thunderbolts. I know That's what people are going to jump to. And other than Wyatt Russell, no one cares about any of those characters. I'm saying the true Dark Avengers. Okay? Put Bullseye in there from the Daredevil show. Make him a new Hawkeye like they did in the comics. But the point in saying all of this is to say there's always a way. It doesn't matter what your story is. Again, space truckers land on an alien planet and open an egg and have to deal with the fallout from that. One of the most amazing sci-fi films ever made. Simple premise, excellently executed. Any story can be a great story if it's told well. And we as audiences deserve better. And that's what I hope Hollywood and these people making these stories realize is that we want good stories. We will pay for good stories. We want our kids to see good stories. We want to keep heroes alive. We want to see heroes on screen. But if they can't do it right now, then this is what we have. We have YouTube. We have a place where we can talk about this stuff. And so that's it for this episode of Exhausted Hero Worship. If you like what you've seen and listened to here, please do whatever version of the things feels right to you, liking or subscribing. I don't know if you want to smash the like button. Feels a little aggressive, but maybe give it a light tap. Just tap it in, to quote the great Carl Weathers. If you didn't like what you heard, or you have your own take, or you want to disagree, then hey, that's what this is here for. That's what a comment section is here for. I love constructive criticism and would love to hear your take or what you would do differently. Now, I will say if your goal is to insult, then I do work with elementary school age children, so I've heard a lot of good ones, but I've at it. Let's see what you got. And so, as others have said, if you made it this far, I thank you for your time and energy in listening. Hopefully, you got something from this. And as the great man said, I drink what?